Well, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Howard Wolfington, chair of the program committee, and it's great to have AGO actually have a real meeting with people together. If I'm not mistaken, this is like the first time in a year, is that correct? So in the room we have, roughly 20 people maybe? And when I last looked at the live stream, there were 8 others watching online who are unable to be with us. So we've got a good representation from the chapter tonight. I'd like to start by first thanking Woodland Park Presbyterian Church for making the facilities available to us. It was specifically requested by our guest speaker for reasons you will soon hear about. And I want to thank Jeffrey Wilzer in the back. Everybody say hi to Jeff. Jeffrey's the minister of music here. He does play the organ, he plays lots of other things, and he's a very eclectic musician. It is my honor to introduce a friend of mine, Joseph O'Donnell, Joe, that I have known since, really since 2017, although I think we actually met back on the East Coast once upon a time. Joe is one of the senior people with Bond Organs out of Portland. He is an excellent musician, super pipe organ guy. He did the work at University Temple United Methodist Church, where I was for a number of years when we had to take out 2 of the 5 divisions and take care of some issues with water. And at the same time, we put in a Syndine system and modernized the console. And Joe ran that whole job, did a magnificent job for us. He is very qualified, not only as an organ technician, but also as a musician. He has degrees in music from, I think it's Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and he's currently the active organist of First Unitarian Church in Portland. So he plays regularly. And he's going to talk about 2 topics for us tonight, and it's a combination of show and tell. He's bought all kinds of props, and we've got some video, and I think he's going to play the organ a little bit. So with no other introduction required, thank you for joining us, Joe.
Thank you all for having me. This is a real thrill, and it's a bit of a project I've been working on for quite a while, so just to be able to present it for the first time is a big event for me. I hope you won't mind if I read. I have no problem with public speaking, but I'm not really good about improvising. And anyone who's heard me play the organ can attest to that as well. When Howard asked me to speak, he offered me my choice of topics, and as long as it had something to do with organ tuning. I had spent some of my pandemic downtime teaching myself to tune the virginal at my church, with an emphasis, curiosity-driven, on Brad Lehman's speculative Bach temperament. So that's what I proposed, but I promise I'll get around to talking about organ tuning as well. If this gets too dry and your eyes start to glaze over, just raise your hand and I'll talk faster. Especially at Bond, when we rent out our portative organ, we get requests for specific temperaments. Our instrument is designed to be easily re-tempered. It's only 162 pipes, and the ones that aren't stoppered or capped are fitted with tuning sleeves. Richard's first such instrument, for whatever reason, had cone-tuned pipes, more on this later, but for obvious reasons they were eventually converted to sleeve tuning. More than one of our new full-size instruments were tuned in unequal temperament at the request of the clients, so we already had some experience figuring out how to set something other than equal. My academic interest really skyrocketed when I visited the website of a computer tuning program called Instrument Tuner. There was a button that said, "Click here for a list of our temperaments." Doing so brought up not just a list of names of temperaments, but 5 pages of detailed specification in spreadsheet form. I'm a big fan of graphs as a means of presenting information, and it struck me that a stacked column graph would be just the thing to display the relative sizes of fifths and major thirds for any given temperament. And by the way, from now on, if I say thirds, just assume I mean major thirds. The graph works well for display purposes because tempered thirds are always sharp, and tempered fifths are almost universally flat. With a spreadsheet using the appropriate formulas to work out the size of the intervals relative to pure, it was a simple matter to generate the graphs you're going to see. All of these calculations are based on sense deviation from pure. Now, talking in terms of sense is really looking through the wrong end of the telescope, because working in sense presumes equal temperament, in which the octave totals 1,200 cents, and each equally tempered semitone is 100 cents. The starting assumption is that an equal tempered fifth is 1.955 cents flat from pure, and an equal tempered third is 13.686 cents sharp of pure. And that's a considerable amount. So, I promise you this is not going to be one of those scholarly talks focusing on theory and ratios and tuning with a monochord, whatever that is. This is about the temperaments as we find them, but we do have to talk a bit about theory. To begin with, there's the Pythagorean comma. This is the discrepancy that results when you attempt to tune around the circle of fifths in pure intervals. If you start with C to G, G to D, D to A to E, etc., and work your way around the circle, by the time you get to F to C at the end, that last C will be just about 24 cents sharp of the first C. Are there reasons in physics for this? Sure, but I don't really care. This is just the way it is. And all the methods of altering or tempering intervals are just attempts at dealing with this overage or comma. Now, the obvious solution, and it would have been just as obvious in the 17th century as it is to us, is to very slightly flatten each fifth until the last one comes out right. This is what we do in equal temperament, which is sometimes half-jokingly referred to as 12th comma mean tone. The problem is that this also results in, to 17th century ears, unacceptably sharp thirds in the most commonly used keys. One of our clients, just as we were finishing a job, sat down on the bench next to me and said, "What would Bach say about this instrument if he was here?" And I'd say, or I said, he'd say, "The thirds are too damn sharp." We don't notice how bad the thirds are because this is all we've ever known. The thing to realize is that it really is about the thirds. Without exception and without hesitation, the historic temperaments accept fifths that are considerably flatter than equal tempered ones. So the objection is not to making the fifths flat. They don't care about that. They want the thirds to come out nice. So, let's see. Onto the graphs. I'll show you equal temperament first, just to establish the format. Let me see if I can do this. There we go. And equal temperament, of course, is really, really boring because everything's the same. But in the graphs that I've devised, C is always in the center. Center column is C. F sharp and G flat, even though it's the same, appear twice just because I wanted it to be symmetrical and C to be in the center. Again, the green bar above represents the thirds, which you can see are almost 14 cents sharp. And the little blue lines at the bottom are the fifths, which are just about 2 cents flat. And this will be the case in all of the graphs. Now you'll be able to see very easily which ones are nice and which ones are not so nice. Let's see. Yep, equal to. Yep. So if we move on, this is kind of the granddaddy of all the unequal temperaments. It's oops, sorry, there we go. Quarter comma mean tone. And don't ask me about the comma, because it's a different comma than the Pythagorean comma, but I'm not going to get into that. Quarter comma mean tone winds up with 11 really nice fifths. It winds up with 8 perfectly pure thirds. That's why there are no green bars here. The thirds are perfectly pure in quarter comma mean tone, except for 4 keys. And the Pythagorean comma gets distributed around all the fifths, so that actually the last fifth, which in this version, there are other versions, winds up on A flat. And it's an extremely sharp fifth, and that's called the wolf. So A flat in this particular version of quarter comma is absolutely unusable. And D flat, G flat, and B for that matter are not very nice either. Okay, sorry. Quarter comma mean tone has been referred to as equal temperament for 8 keys, because the 8 keys that are good are equally good. Although it always reminds me of Tom Lehrer's joke in his song about new math, where he says that base 8 is just like base 10 if you're missing 2 fingers. In this case, you're missing 4 keys, but the 8 ones you have that you can play in are really, really good. It's wonderful for Monteverdi. So, here are a couple of solutions to getting rid of that wolf fifth. This is Kernberger 3, which has a number of pure fifths, which makes it very easy to tune by ear. You can simply start at C to F, work backwards around the circle of fifths in pure fifths, and then distribute the overage among 4 pretty flat fifths and 1 not quite so flat fifth. This was a particular favorite of Olympic organ builders, it seems. Their Bosch organ in Wenatchee is still tuned in Kernberger 3. Another elegant solution, which I really like, is Thomas Young's, one of his, because it winds up with this beautiful parabola, or a mirror image of the thirds going in either direction from C and radiating around the circle of fifths. It's also fairly easy to set by ear. There's only 2 different sizes of fifths in addition to the pure ones. And you really have to admire the technical genius. I still haven't figured out the formula for reconciling the fifths and the thirds and making sure you get everything going in the right place. And of course, nobody in the 17th century or 18th century saw a graph like this, so they were working toward this, but they managed to create it nonetheless. And then there's Bradley Lehman's interpretation of the squiggles on the title page of the Well-Tempered Clavier. This ornament at the top, according to Lehman, is Bach's encoding of the way to tune the fifths of a temperament that's suitable for all keys, and which is thought to be what he intended for the Well-Tempered Clavier. Let's see. So yes, that's squiggles. This is a kind of an interpretation of how he identifies each of the little circles there, and as to what they meant for the size of the fifths relative to one another. There are 5 more severely tempered fifths. There's 2 pure fifths, and then there's 2 or 3 or 4 gently tempered fifths. And the graph will show you that as well. There we go. I had to go to a side-by-side column in this one because there is a sharp fifth right there. And it looks really funny if it's the stacked column, and this is much clearer. So Lehman's hypothesis was that Bach was focused on key color. He was interested not just in being able to play in all the keys, but in making sure that each key had its own distinct color. And he wrote the pieces to accommodate that and to highlight that. Although I'm not entirely convinced that that's the only reason he chose to write in C-sharp major. Does anybody play the C-sharp from Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 1? It's very true that in equal temperament it would sound exactly the same in C or in C sharp, and so what's the reason to do it in C sharp? And part of it is that the color comes out, but another reason is that it's a reading exercise. It's incredible, you know, when you have to sit down and analyze it, for all the keys he goes through in the course of this short little piece. At one point he's actually in E sharp major. I determined that it would be much easier to play it if it were transposed to D flat, so that's what I did. And in the course of that, I found out that some of it is in F, but with all the double sharps and everything, he's actually in E sharp major. Let's see. It's also recorded that Bach played through the entire well-tempered clavier for guests on more than one occasion. So the idea that he wrote, you know, with different temperament in mind for different pieces is really untenable. It's also recorded that Bach could tune his harpsichord in 10 to 15 minutes. So he was pretty good at it. And he had some good ideas about, you know, what he wanted to do. So this is actually, it's a very useful temperament. It's far less severe than some of the others like Kimberger 3. The odd thing is there's a very sharp third on A, which seems kind of strange, but you know, that's what he was going for. He seemed pleased with it, as far as we know. Again, this is speculative, but I think Lehman's evidence is pretty convincing. Oh, let's see, so what should I do now? Would you like to hear it? Okay. And no one has volunteered to play the C sharp major, so I'm going to have to. But I'm not going to play much of it. And again, did I explain this organ is tuned in the Lehman Bach temperament? I was quite delighted to discover that some years ago, and I'm even more delighted to find out that it's still in that temperament. So that's an excellent illustration of what it is. Here's the C sharp major prelude. It is part of it in C sharp major. It's not so interesting. Here it is to see. Minor seconds, and those are the ones he chooses to use when he plays simultaneous minor seconds twice in this piece. And they're actually in this temperament so wide that they're almost consonant. It's really quite beautiful. Well, here it is. and the sort of tempo it's meant to be played at. That's another thing about the C sharp major. It's marked presto, which actually kind of glosses over a lot of the crazy intervals in the temperament. But in this, he kind of dwells on it so that you get this beautiful C major chord that's constantly coming back. This wonderful. Oh, by the way, if you transpose it to C sharp, there's that sound. So, what does this have to do with organ tuning? Well, not much, I'm ashamed to say. Harpsichords, like harps and guitars, are sufficiently unstable that they have to be tuned by their players. They're, among the polyphonic instruments, they're the ones that really the players have to know how to tune. This is not the case, as many of you will attest, with organs. In Bach's time, organ tuning was a three-person affair. Someone had to raise the wind so that someone else could play the keys to make the pipes sound for the tuner. So whatever opinions Bach had about temperament, the influence he could exert on anything other than a brand new instrument would have been minimal. He would have been quite constrained by the organs as he found them, which helps to explain why the organ works key signatures don't stray very far from or into flats or sharps. That's not to say he doesn't modulate all over the place, he really does, but the home keys are the keys that would have been most congenial on the organs he was forced to work with. But he did, of course, push the boundaries. I got to play that crazy descending pedal passage in the G minor fantasy on the organ in Kierberger and Wenatchee, and it was very interesting. But tuning in that time was something you just didn't, go in and retemper an organ. When the multiple organs in Buxtehude's church in Lübeck had their tuning reconciled at one point, I read that it took 31 and a half days just to tune the flue work. It is interesting, though, that the organ in the new church in Leipzig, which was another organ that Bach would have found when he arrived in Leipzig, had one manual stop, a Lieblich Gedeckt, that is listed on the specification as well-tempered for concerto music. So unlike the rest of the organ, there was one stop that was in a more mildly unequal temperament. It probably had stoppered wood pipes. It may have been intended to be retempered, or it may just have had its own set temperament. So the idea of fitting organ pipes with tuning sleeves to vary their length is, all things considered in the history of organs, a relatively recent innovation, probably gaining traction in America in the late 19th century. The norm had been cone tuning. See, I have a cone here. I'll just take this off. In cone tuning, the pipes are cut the pipes are cut to length, and then a cone like this, which is concave and convex, is used to either flare out the top of the pipe or to cone it in a little bit, which changes its pitch. As it gets coned in, it goes flatter, of course, and then flaring it out makes it go a little sharper. And you're all welcome to come up and look at the exhibits after this. Cone-tuned pipes have a limited range of adjustment. There's only so far you can go. And they can be easily damaged even in the course of careful routine maintenance. Frequently the metal is skived or thinned out a little bit on the top to make it easier to cone. Or, more often as well, the mouth is reinforced at the sides so that the mouth doesn't collapse when the pipe is struck with the cone. This style works very well in very tight spacing, where you have room for just your tuning cone and not much else, and where sleeved pipes in the vicinity could easily be disturbed, and that's a real pain. Cone tuner, or tuners have to be very careful using the cone, of course. But it's shocking to find pipes. Sometimes you see little pipes where somebody's just taken their hand and pinched them a little bit. It's so annoying. It's just because the previous tuner wasn't properly equipped. Closed wooden pipes have stoppers, which can be moved up and down for tuning. Actually, when you're up here, if you look up in the organ there, you'll see the pedal sub-bass or Borden, which is rectangular wood pipes, and you can see actually the stopper handles sticking out of the top. And you can just simply move those up and down for tuning. Open wood pipes can have bendable flaps over the top, which partially shade the top of the pipe and make it go sharper or flatter. Capped metal pipes can be cut to length and tuned by bending their extra large ears, either away or toward the mouth. That actually affects the tuning as well. That's in cases where the pipes have been cut to length and the caps have been soldered on and they don't move. If not cut to length, the capped metal pipes can have canisters of the appropriate shape, which can likewise be moved for tuning. Open metal pipes may also have scrolls, whether or not the pipes are slotted at the tops, or even internal tuning slides on large pipes. Reed pipes are made for frequent tuning. The physics of their sound production differ from those of flue pipes, so they don't drift with temperature at the constant 1.6 cents per degree that flue pipes do, especially if their resonators are some fraction of the length of corresponding flue pipes. A tuning wire, oh wait, I have pictures. Why am I not showing you the pictures? There we go. Here we have an open metal pipe, totally over at the top, a stopper wood pipe, and a reed pipe. This is some details of the mouths or the sound generating parts of flue pipes, but here's the reed. So the reed pipe has a tongue which sits in front of an open metal tube called a shallot, which is open at the front and open at the top. The shallot is wedged into the boot. Yeah, the shallot is wedged into the boot with a wooden wedge, and then the tuning wire projects through the boot and can be moved up and down to allow more or less of the reed to vibrate. Make sure I'm sticking to my notes. This changes the pitch. We're obviously moving the wire, but it also changes the volume of the pipe. And depending on how the pipes are made, how far they have to be tuned, frequently there's some sort of compensating adjustment at the top of the resonator, which is the part that really fine-tunes the sound of the pipes. And then, a good tuner will know which to use when, whether to scroll at the top, tune on the wire, or some combination of both. Sometimes there are also caps, although caps can't close completely because, as Chick Holtkamp once said, a closed reed won't speak. Yeah. If the air can't go through, it's not going to work. I think that's about it for the formal presentation. I would be happy to take your questions, and I will be happy to repeat them for the live stream. Yes, Carl?
I'd be interested in knowing the impact of some of these different temperaments on other instruments that may be going along and playing with the organ.
Yeah, that's a good question. He's asking about what happens when you have an organ in an odd temperament and the instrumentalists have to cope with it. And a lot of the people we deal with are the early music specialists who are adept at not only playing with various temperaments, but transposing down a half step, because some people think that a half step low is old pitch. So our positive organ can be adjusted so that it plays at A415 or at A440. String players, I think, kind of enjoy having purer fifths and purer thirds, especially the thirds. They're like singers. Singers will adjust and really retemper things without our even realizing it. All the choir directors who nag their singers to sing thirds sharper than the piano can play them are really twisting the harmony. Because singers will, if you ask a singer to sing a major third, they're going to sing something closer to what, happens in the middle of the Bach Lehman temperament. So instrumentalists, they can kind of deal with it.
What about the piano?
That's a good question. You mean this piano?
Any piano trying to go along with one of these, because, you know.
Yeah. That's why I think the previous music director had the piano tempered to match the organ. I don't know how in the world he did it, where he found a piano tuner to do that, because most of them are reluctant to do stuff like that. But in this case, the piano is also in the Bach Lehman temperament.
But if it were not,
Oh yeah.
then you can't play them together.
No, you can't. Yeah, there's I don't know, I think it's in Bellotti, there's a Casavant out in the Tri-Cities that is tuned in something like Bellotti. And last time I was there, they asked me what they could do to put the organ and the piano in tune, and I said, well, certain notes are in tune already, but not all of them. You'd have to retemper the organ really, or they're not going to find somebody to do the piano.
It's particularly an issue if you try to play handbells with Kellner.
Yeah, it is. So don't do that. Howard says there's an issue if you try to play handbells with Kellner. It's about the handbells, I mean, handbells are always waving around, so the Doppler effect is always active. So I can't imagine it's a big problem. The main problem is the pitch level. That's our problem in my church, is trying to get the organ up to pitch in the winter when it's so cold. As I say, the flue work, which is the heart of what you work with when you tune, you always match the reeds to the flues. The flue work is 1.6 cents per degree. Sharp when it's warm and flat when it's cold.
That's regardless of metal.
Yep. Yeah, that's the great misconception about organ tuning, is that it's the expansion of the materials that causes the pitch change. But in fact, the pitch goes the wrong way. If you think that a pipe like this is expanding when it gets warm, it means it actually gets bigger and should get flatter. But in fact, it goes sharper because it's the weight of the air that's operative. And lighter, warmer air is easier to move. That's why humidity isn't such a big deal either. It's really temperature. Yes, Dave?
Seems like if you wanted to match the piano to the organ, can't you just play a note of the organ and zero in?
He's asking if you can just easily match a piano to an organ, and you can, but you really have to talk this over with the tuner, because piano tuning is a different animal, especially with regards to stretch. Piano tuners, as they ascend, they always make things sharper, and some more than others, so that by the time you get rather high, you're sharper. Your C's are all progressively sharper to each other. So that you could probably find a way to preserve the temperament as you do that. And obviously, whoever did this did, but it's a tricky thing, because I've tried tuning pianos and I don't know how to stretch it. An unstretched piano sounds really, really dead. Another question?
I just wanted to volunteer. One thing a lot of people, it's hard to make the customers understand, that I frequently am asked when we play the piano and the organ together in the church, tune them at the same temperature and play them at that temperature.
Right.
Otherwise, it ain't going to happen, because they go in opposite directions.
Yes, they do.
The piano goes, the organ goes sharp when it's hot, the piano will go flat.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he's saying that the piano and the organ move in opposite directions with temperature, so the only way to ensure that they're going to be in tune with each other is to tune them at the temperature they're going to be used at, which isn't always easy to do. It's sometimes difficult to get the room to the right temperature, because the room reacts differently when it's empty and just the heater is running as to when it's full and human bodies are helping to maintain the temperature. Yeah, we've had heating systems that just wreak havoc with organs. Really, the Great Division can easily go 20 cents sharp when the heating system comes on and starts blowing warm air on it. So what do? You just do everything you can to get it right and trust that it's going to work out in the end. But having helpful clients who are, willing to turn the heat on in advance and all that sort of thing, and be ready for you when you arrive so you can get right to work is a really good thing. But they're the people who know, how the room reacts and all that. There's very few churches I know of where the organist isn't the local expert on the heating system.
Yeah.
Because organists know how important it is to get the temperature right. Yeah, we do a lot of duets at my church. The pianist there is wonderful, and we love to play together. But in the winter, it's a little dicey. Yeah. Anyone else? Sir.
One of the questions I've never been much for academia of the intricacies of physics and acoustics and stuff. But when my ears tell me, you mentioned about some keys that work really well with color tuning and certain things. During the practical usage of it, getting the most bang out of the buck, I'm curious just how it works here, for example, the piano. Does it play better on local music than does it try to play, I don't know, like Copeland or Gershwin or something like that?
Yeah, that's.
My only real close experience seemed to contrast was the concert Trinity Lutheran Church in Linwood, where they had a posse organ there, which they had a brass ensemble playing a recital concert with organ. And the God reality and the block and some of the handle things, it all sounded very cool. Then they did a couple of things. I think they did some, Fanfare for Common Man or something. And also they did the Jugu dialogue of the
Oh yeah.
And it was awesome. It just sounded like an elementary school band for the first time. Why is that?
It's not understandable to the rest of us.
Yeah, we
can't
didn't.
repeat that.
You're talking about whether the temperament is useful in everything?
Yeah, it probably easier to because I'll just put my voice in this way. It was clearly beautiful for the Baroque stuff. The Renaissance stuff was cool. But as it got over about 1850, it was like, ooh. It was really unpleasant to be here. And is that, do you just not play music like that?
Yeah, that's pretty much what you do, which is unfortunate. And different instruments have different things that they're well suited for. I'm not necessarily an advocate of unequal temperament in organs. It just fascinates me.
Now, if you transpose some of the more contemporary stuff, then you can find a key where it's not quite so.
Right, yeah. He says you may be able to transpose some of the contemporary stuff so you find a key that's more congenial. And, as long as it doesn't modulate up a half step in the middle of it, you're probably fine. But to me, it's an academic interest. It helps explain why Bach wrote the way he did, even for organ, but especially for harpsichord. Anybody else? Okay.
Well, thank Joe
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
volunteering his time tonight, and great talk.
Thank you for listening. And feel free to come up in a socially distanced way and admire the pipes. If you have any questions,